Van, call 0800 300 202.
Not only believe, I believe that there are many different species of ships, there are many different species of extraterrestrials, and not all of them are up to good.
I think that it's sort of the romantic side of me that likes to believe that there's something else out there. It's something better or wiser or brighter or whatever.
The universe is so big, and there's so many worlds that must be on one of them or more, or something that's alive. That could be. It's fun to think about. It's exciting. What do you think?
Have we been visited by other life forms from beyond our tiny corner of the universe? And if we have, can we handle the knowledge that we are not alone?
The intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield announced at noon today that the field had come into possession of a flying saucer. According to information released by the department, the disc was detected on a ranch in the Roswell vicinity. Brazel said that he had previously found two weather observations this year. An examination by the nail last night at mysterious objects on Roger M. Ray Mexico Ranch was a harmless weather balloon, not a flying disc.
50 years ago, something happened near the town of Roswell, New Mexico. That event, known as the Roswell Incident, has become synonymous with flying saucer crash, alien visitation, government cover-up, or many say, a jump to conclusion and gross distortion of the facts. Hello, I'm Jonathan Frakes. Mention Roswell, and chances are, no matter where you are, someone will have heard the name and most likely will have an opinion about the subject. In this program, we'll take a look at what is known about Roswell and what is still unknown. And we'll try to answer the questions, what happened here, and what does the government know about it? So what is this Roswell thing everyone's talking about? Well, above all else, Roswell has become something of a cultural phenomenon. Since the late 70s, there have been dozens of books both promoting the theory of UFO crash and refuting it. There have been countless magazine articles, TV shows, movies, and a burgeoning presence on the internet. It seems that everywhere you look, there's someone saying something about Roswell.
I believe that a flying saucer from another planet crashed. I believe that a man and his son found debris, and I believe that the government, the United States government, acquired the wreckage and put it and its inhabitants in storage.
It is a story about government deliberately concealing details of the incident, or, depending on how you look at it, the whole thing is a case of misinterpretation and outright fabrication.
Something not made on this earth crashed in 1947.
So we were quite amused that they misidentified our balloon for a flying saucer.
I would say that I believe that there was an alien craft that crashed north of Roswell.
I'm convinced beyond any doubt that what happened at Roswell was that a Project Mogul train of weather balloons, about 23 weather balloons, carrying several aluminum foil radar targets so it could be tracked, crashed on the ranch of a man known as Mac Brazel.
General Dubose, who was the Chief of Staff of 8th Air Force in July of 1947, told us flat out that the balloon explanation was a cover story.
The story of the Roswell incident has been painstakingly researched, pieced together from public records and eyewitness accounts. The basic sequence of events which transpired here half a century ago is well documented and generally accepted as fact. Speculation aside, we have a pretty good idea of what happened and in what order. Let's go back a moment to early summer 1947. Beginning in the month of June, there was an unprecedented wave of UFO sightings around the country. All over, people were reporting seeing strange, unidentifiable aerial phenomena. The Army seemed to be at a loss to explain the observations.
Army fighter planes are on patrol for flying saucers. The control tower's in touch and on the watch. So are a whole lot of people these days. They're seeing flying saucers everywhere.
July 4th in southeastern New Mexico was marked by some of the most violent thunderstorms on record. A ranch foreman named William Mac Brazel heard what he described as an odd sort of explosion, very loud and distinctly different than thunder. Researchers have since established the sequence of events that followed. On Saturday, July the 5th, while out riding horseback on the ranch, Brazel discovers a large quantity of lightweight metallic debris. The material was scattered over an area 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. Brazel makes the 75-mile drive into Roswell and reports his find to Chavez County Sheriff George A. Wilcox, who in turn, upon witnessing the debris himself, decides to notify the military authorities at Roswell Army Airfield. In the meantime, Wilcox speaks to Frank Joyce, an announcer for local radio station KGFL in Roswell, looking for anything newsworthy. The following day, Brazel escorts Intelligence Officer Major Jesse Marcel and Sheridan Cabot of the Counterintelligence Corps to the debris field. The two then gather and load up some debris and return to Roswell. The next day, Tuesday the 8th, troops are deployed from the base to begin recovery at the debris field. By now, soldiers are already stationed at and guarding a second location some distance away, believed to have been an actual crash site. Colonel William Blanchard, the commanding officer of the base, instructs Lieutenant Walter Hott to issue a press release disclosing that the Army has recovered the remains of a flying disc. That afternoon, the story hits the news wires and the phone lines in Roswell are jammed. Evening papers all over the West pick up the story. Also that afternoon, Major Marcel is sent with some debris to Fort Worth, Texas, to meet with Brigadier General Roger Ramey. At a hastily arranged press conference, Ramey announces that the identification of the recovered debris as a flying saucer has been a mistake, and that it is actually nothing more than the remains of a downed weather balloon with an attached radar reflector. The following morning, the Roswell Daily Record runs the revised, sanitized version of the story. And so, for a few brief hours, the lid was off on one of the most fantastic stories of human existence. Then suddenly, the lid was slammed shut. 2 months later, Chuck Yeager would break the sound barrier and America would find itself taking the first small steps toward its own program to travel into space. Everyone moved on, and the wild flying saucer story was forgotten by all, except those who were there. 30 years would pass before troubling memories prompted some of those participants to start talking.
We probably conducted between 2,500 and 3,000 interviews with 500 different people. And what we're talking about is not only people who saw some part of the story or who were in Roswell and knew part of the story, but who were family members, second-hand witnesses, if you will. My father told me this story. My uncle told me this story.
One of those who was there was Glenn Dennis, at the time employed by the Ballard Funeral Home.
I got a call in the afternoon from a gentleman that called and said that he was a mortuary officer, and he was wanting to know if we, how many, and if we had some baby caskets 3'6" or 4 foot long that were hermetically sealed, airtight, waterproof and all this. And I informed that we always kept it 4 foot. You want to know how many? And I said, one in the display, one in the storeroom. And he said, how long would it take to get more? And I said, hey, what's going on out there? What's your problem? And he said, well, we want to know how well prepared you are in case we should have an epidemic or something out here with the base children and all that.
Coming up next,
it's a piece of a vehicle that didn't originate on this planet.
When we continue with Roswell, cover-ups, and close encounters.
Arm smashed weather balloon on a flying disc. Arm smashed weather balloon on a flying disc.
Almost equally intriguing to researchers as the question of what crashed outside Roswell is the mystery of what happened to the remnants of the wreckage. After the original carload of debris was taken to Roswell Army Airfield by Jesse Marcel, orders were sent to secure the remaining material at the Foster Ranch. The balance of the debris was heavily guarded at Roswell Airfield, while some, accompanied by Marcel, was flown to Fort Worth to be inspected by General Ramey. It is well documented that wreckage was sent on to Wright Field, which at the time was the Army's center for top-secret technological research, This is where captured German and Soviet military hardware was dismantled and studied. Many believe that this was where the initial work was begun to reverse engineer the recovered alien craft. There is also evidence that within hours of the initial reports, a satchel of the material was flown to Washington for a briefing with President Truman. The compelling questions remain. If this was simply a downed weather balloon as the government claims, then why was the material handled under such high security? And why would a routine recovery require the immediate attention of so many high-ranking officials, including the President of the United States? A new generation has grown up since the Roswell incident. UFO believers flock to see the small town with the intergalactic past. Some of the people you would most expect to be excited about Roswell are the people who call Roswell home. Curiously, many of the town's residents say they've never even heard of the 1947 incident, or that it's of no concern to them.
What? And I tell my husband, what is this? And he's from Texas. And he said, well, I've already heard about this years back, and I just never had heard about it till, like I tell you, 2 years ago.
I just ignore it in my life.
I can't even get on the phone when they say, let me have your address, and I say Roswell, New Mexico, and they just tell me, oh, that's where the UFO landed, you know, just kind of, oh, I guess.
I've heard of it, but I don't believe in it. I think it's just like a bunch of stuff made up and stuff.
Well, Roswell's my hometown. I've lived here all my life, like I tell you, and this is great, but I'm just not into it.
So who are the ones asking the questions? Surprisingly, many of the strongest voices speaking out about Roswell are not New Age eccentrics, but are from the scientific community. Stanton Friedman is a nuclear physicist who has worked on advanced aerospace technologies and nuclear power plant systems for companies such as General Electric, Westinghouse, General Motors, and TRW. Bruce Maccabee has been a Navy optical physicist for over 20 years. He received his PhD from American University and has been personally researching the subject of extraterrestrial intelligence for the past 25 years. Lee Chagall is a materials scientist who has been a consultant for both NASA and the Department of Defense. He specializes in aerospace manufacturing techniques and high-energy lasers. These scientists, through personal research, are convinced that what crashed in Roswell was from another world. To fully investigate a persistent mystery as intriguing as Roswell, researchers endeavor to consider all possible explanations. In the case of Roswell, there is still the question of whether the crashed object could have been something other than a UFO.
My inclination is to believe that it was a Air Force or Central Intelligence Agency balloon project, and that there was an initial attempt to cover up this intelligence program.
John Pike is Director of Space Policy at the Federation of American Scientists.
I'm extremely skeptical that it had anything to do with extraterrestrial intelligence because for one of their vehicles to crash implies a fallibility on the part of their technology that's simply inconsistent with the reliability that one needs to build starships.
Or could it have been a classified U.S. project? Aerospace engineer Ron Ray spoke with us at Edwards Air Force Base.
Yeah, the possibility exists back in the 40s that because all this new technology came out of Germany, we had scientists from Germany that either we were testing new advanced concepts to us at the time, these rocket engines, which were brand new to us, or this was some kind of smokescreen, if you will, to hide or to put the Russians off guard, make them think we were further along than we really were. And there's been a history of misinformation on both sides trying to keep each other off guard, and that very likely is one of the possibilities. If it wasn't Roswell, we're probably doing it some other place.
But researcher Don Schmidt doesn't agree with either explanation.
The debris field, as you'll see in some of the shots, is open pasture. It's visible for miles from the air. In fact, Kevin Rando and I have flown over the site on 2 separate occasions. You can literally see for almost 50 miles. Now, I can assure you that if there was anything that had gone off course, anything that had been lost, that was of top secret nature, they would have found it before anybody.
With all that we know about the circumstances of the Roswell case, It's puzzling as to why more people who were here 50 years ago don't come forward now and tell their story. Could it be that those who have been keeping their secrets for all these years are still afraid to talk?
There was an element of fear in this whole thing from the beginning.
Many that were involved at Roswell, including Frank Joyce, knew the possible dangers right from the start.
And he said, our lives will never be the same. That's his exact words.
In a small, desolate town, during a much simpler time when business deals were sealed with a handshake, a rancher's word meant everything. The possibility of ridicule resulting from claims of little green men in flying saucers was real, so it's certainly understandable that many residents might not have spoken of the events of early 1947. But why wouldn't those who carried a burning story with them for some 50 years not come forward today? One Roswell witness that has asked to remain anonymous explains why he hasn't come forward until now.
I know of people who said they were threatened, and I know several of the ranchers in that area were told to stay away from that area, and if they had picked up any of the metal or any of the wreckage as souvenirs to return it, or they'd be prosecuted.
Metallurgist and author Lee Chagall spent years working with advanced flight systems and technologies, including NASA's Hubble telescope and the Navy's Super Arbok missile system. Now Chagall is revealing what he believes to be a piece of Roswell crash debris.
It's a piece of a vehicle that didn't originate on this planet.
Chagall says that the material was given to him by a woman whose father was a pilot stationed at Roswell Army Airfield at the time of the crash. While authenticating her background, Chagall subjected the object to both metallurgic and chemical analysis.
We found out that it is made of homogeneous, 100% pure aluminum. You can't get 100% homogeneous pure aluminum. The only way we believe that that could be made is in an environment under extreme pressure and no gravity, in the vacuum of space.
Chagall is adamant that the technology to create the kind of metal simply did not exist in 1947. Using computer-aided design, he created a three-dimensional model that leads him to suspect that the object was part of the spacecraft's engine.
I think it is a type of containment valve or flow valve used in a superconducting magnetic drive. It's coated with a thin layer of glass and it has what I believe to be extremely curious dielectric properties, and it probably was a valve that operated with a series of valves to allow the flow of a material like liquid nitrogen or some very cold liquid that was used to surround the magnetic core.
If that explains what happened to the wreckage, what about the ship's occupants? Over the past few years, various film clips and photographs have surfaced that were purported to be actual images of recovered alien life forms. All footage and photos that have come to light have been scrutinized by investigators, and so far, no pictures have been verified as being genuine.
Everything that has to do with UFOs or super technology or extraterrestrials has been placed into an aspect of everybody that believes in that is crazy, that they're all nuts, that they belong in mental institutions, and so the legitimate military and aerospace basically say, well, you know, you belong in a rubber room, or the men in the white coats are going to come and get you. So there's always been a like I said, a laughter curtain, a ridicule that anybody that purports to believe in this or to have seen it or to filmed it or photographed it or researched it is purposely put up to ridicule.
The incident at Roswell could be explained by one of three possibilities. It was either a downed weather balloon, a crashed alien spaceship, or some top-secret military project gone wrong. And every investigator who has researched the case says it definitely was not a top-secret military project. So we're left with two choices, balloon or alien craft. What do you think? If it was a balloon, why do eyewitnesses describe the wreckage as something not manufactured on Earth? And why did the military treat the material as something far more important than balloon debris? And if it was a crashed UFO, why doesn't the government admit it? We'll try to answer those questions when Roswell, Cover-Ups and Close Encounters returns. Stay tuned.
altitude weather balloon, not a flying disc. It was a harmless high-altitude weather balloon, not a flying disc.
I really think the story here is not something crashing here so much. The story is that our government, which is supposed to, have an open society, clamps the lid on something using tactics that are very questionable, that are constitutionally questionable in my opinion, and getting away with it.
Within hours of the original press release, samples of the debris were sent to Fort Worth. There, General Ramey posed for pictures with Jesse Marcel and pieces of a weather balloon that Ramey claimed came from Roswell.
What was brought through the building and loaded on the airplane was not the same material. It was not a weather balloon.
They tried to kill every last word of it. They didn't want anyone to know anything about this, not even a thought.
While at Roswell Army Airfield, Glenn Dennis witnessed what he believed to be the wreckage of an airplane crash. He was immediately detained for questioning, then threatened by military officers.
When I turned around, there was another captain standing there, and he came up and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, don't go in and start a bunch of rumors. Nothing's happened out here. There's a crash or anything else. And he said, you'll get in some trouble or something similar. I don't remember the exact words of it. And anyway, I didn't like his attitude, and I said, I'm a civilian, you can't do anything to me, you can go to hell. And that's when he really punched me a little bit, and he said, somebody will be picking your bones out of the sand if you do. And that was the only time when I was ever threatened.
There is a cover-up. After many years of investigation, I'm certain that there is a cover-up as far as Roswell. Not by the U.S. Air Force, not by the U.S. government, but by those people who falsely claim that the government is covering up. They are the ones that are withholding key information from the public.
Aviation historian Philip Klass believes that a declassified letter to the Pentagon by Lieutenant General Nathan Twining might be evidence disproving the Roswell cover-up theory.
Here is a letter written by Lieutenant General Nathan Twining on September 24th, 1947, in which he says, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. But what you never see or never hear quoted is a later paragraph in that same letter in which General Twining says, due consideration must be given to the following: the lack of physical evidence in the shape of crash-recovered exhibits which would undeniably prove the existence of these objects. This letter alone, that comment alone, disproves Roswell. And because of that, writers of books on Roswell, producers of TV shows intentionally omit any reference to that.
Not all researchers believe this letter disproves a cover-up.
There's no doubt there was a cover-up. General DuBose, who was the Chief of Staff of 8th Air Force in July of 1947, told us flat out that the balloon explanation was a cover story.
In 1990, DuBose was interviewed at the age of 89. Under hypnosis, he recalled the events of July 1947.
A cover story, the balloon part of it, for the remnants that were taken from this location, and Al Clark took to Washington, and whatever happened to him then, I have no knowledge. But that's but that part of it was, in fact, the story that we were told to give to the public in the news, and that was it.
General DuBose also said that he was not supposed to discuss this event with General Ramey, the commander of 8th Air Force.
There was talk of some elements that had been found on the ground outside of Roswell, New Mexico. The debris or the elements were to be placed in a suitable container and that Al Clark, the base commander at Roswell, would pick them up and hand deliver them to McMillan in Washington. And that was, and that nobody, I must stress this, that no one was to discuss this with their wife, me with Rainey, with anyone. The matter, as far as we're concerned, was closed as of that moment when that was it.
Why not if it's just a weather balloon? Even if it's a balloon assigned to the top secret Project Mogul, there is certainly nothing in the balloon arrays or nothing in the equipment that requires that high level of security. Why create this massive cover-up to do that?
Those who are convinced there's more to Roswell than just a weather balloon are determined to get answers. Getting through the fortress of information guarded by the government, however, is not easy.
While UFO researchers claim the federal government keeps the truth about Roswell locked tightly away, it is the goal of these researchers and other interested parties to extract official information. Using procedures mandated by the Freedom of Information Act, investigators have been chipping away at what they see as a fortress guarding the secrets of hundreds of UFO encounters. Stanton Friedman, the researcher who first spoke to Jesse Marcel in 1978, says getting answers from the government is not so simple.
Many people think that it's easy with freedom of information, this magic key that unlocks all the doors. Oh, you got to ask, you get anything you want. Nothing could be farther from the truth. You have the right to ask. They don't have to reveal because there's a page full of exclusions. And the major exclusion is national security. Anyway, we apply under freedom of information, the NSA, we want these 18 UFO documents. All we have is a list, basically, dates. No, gentlemen, we can't release anything. National security here. We're going around in circles. So we try a legal ploy. We ask that they submit the documents to the judge so he can determine whether they are properly invoking national security. They provide him none of the documents, but a 21-page top-secret affidavit justifying the withholding of the documents, which he gets to see in chambers. He was so impressed with that he ruled in their favor. He said that the public interest in disclosure, which he recognized, was far outweighed by the potential danger to the security of the United States should this information be released. National security and flying saucers. We filed one of these wonderful, magical Freedom of Information Act requests for the affidavit, and we got it. We expected a little censorship, and, you know, it's not too surprising that there's some blacked out stuff. But then it gets so darn heavy, and it's truly laughable. You're telling me there's no cover-up? 75% blacked out. There is no question whatsoever that agencies of the United States government are withholding UFO information. Now, if he asks, do I know what it is they're withholding? Well, when I see it, I'll know. But certainly they're withholding the story about the Roswell crash.
Former Command Sergeant Major Robert Dean was assigned to Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers in Europe, where he was exposed to highly classified operations and information on a daily basis. Since leaving the military, he has formed Stargate International, whose goal is to educate the public on the reality of extraterrestrial presence.
It's easy to lie to the American people. Lying in government has almost become institutionalized in American government. I'll give you a small example. NASA at Houston was circulating an in-house document to the personnel at Houston on how to avoid the Freedom of Information Act. They were telling their personnel literally how to lie to the public and to the media. So secrets can be kept. The lid has been kept on this one for well over 50 years. And it's quite easy to lie to the American public because they don't do their homework and they don't pay attention.
One other theory about Roswell has surfaced in recent years. Knowing what we do about America in 1947, is it possible that both the flying saucer story and the balloon explanation could have been smokescreen to distract the Soviets from our own secret Cold War military programs?
Coming up next,
the knowledge of that would be so frightful that in itself could disrupt our society.
When we continue with Roswell, cover-ups, and close encounters.
Was found weather balloon, not a flying disc. Was found
Scientist John Pike's views seem to concur with those stated in the Brookings Institute report.
There are a lot of reasons the government might want to cover up the fact that it was in contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. It could destabilize our society and political system, call into question religious or economic beliefs, and it could get a lot of other governments on this planet very nervous about what sort of advantage we were getting from our contact with the aliens.
The report also warns of the conquistador syndrome, where many cultures have disintegrated that have come into contact with others of greater knowledge or power. Some say that our government of the people, by the people, and for the people has no right to keep this information out of public reach. Others, however, feel that a cover-up may be for our own good.
Suppose they did find something within this, that the knowledge of that would be so frightful that in itself could disrupt our society.
The Orson Welles War of the Worlds radio show had that very effect.
I'm extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips and many succeeding novels and adventure stories should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
But what Roswell's secret from 1947 could still be a threat to us today?
Suppose there was something contained within that craft, some alien technology that could be used either for or against us, but its effect could change the course of history. Withholding it would prevent that change from occurring at that time. Maybe some technology that might alter our dependence on oil. Just imagine if tomorrow we didn't have a dependence on oil. We didn't need it anymore. We discovered some energy source, some engine, some power that relinquished our dependence on oil. What would that do to the economic system of the world? It would collapse overnight.
Or could a recovered technology be used for strategic gain? If a government reverse engineered the technology from a starship in the same manner that the military might back engineer a rival country's spy plane, for instance, the government could stand to gain immeasurably.
A number of technologies were either partially inspired or wholly inspired from what was recovered at Roswell. It's amazing that when you look at the profiles from both the sides and from dead on, how close to stealth technology and spy plane designs that the Roswell ship resembles. We firmly believe that she is the design Rosetta Stone and the holy grail for aerospace design technology.
The issue to me is government accountability for what the government did. The government should make public all of its records on this or any other subject, unless only there's a current, real security need for them not to do so, and then the public can make up its own mind.
The problem is that we, the people, don't want to know. Sure, there's been a government cover-up, and people say to me, how could this be kept secret for 50 years? Well, the answer is not without the wholehearted cooperation of the American people.
So, what would happen if aliens landed on Earth tomorrow? Would we welcome them as fellow intelligent beings? Or would our own feelings of superiority shatter and give way to fear and mistrust?
The first test was the announcement of a tiny microbe in a little meteorite that landed in Allen Hills in Antarctica. That was a test of our society. How would we react to the announcement of life on another planet? And what do you think occurred? Society was divided right down the middle. Those on the one side said impossible, it couldn't be life. Earth is the center of intelligence in the universe. And those on the other side of the fence who said, we knew it all along.
I'm convinced that something has been here before and that something may be here now.
We interrupt this program to give you a bulletin just received from one of our naval units at sea. A large object traveling at supersonic speed is headed over the North Atlantic toward the east coast of the United States.
The only thing I could think of is that it would just cause such pandemonium in the country. I mean, a real scare. I mean, it's, out of nowhere, all of a sudden there's alien life.
They'd probably be freaked out.
I think people would panic instead of acting sensible about it.
Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I think something is happening.
Well, here we are, some 50 years since the unfolding of either the greatest story of our existence or the biggest case of misinterpretation in modern history. What have we learned? Are there any answers to be found in this town or in the halls of Washington? Is this really the fantastic story that some say that it is?
Don't be totally snowed and turned off by all the hype that goes on. That's a result of the fact that there really isn't a UFO industry out there now.
There are many that still carry the 50-year-old memory of Roswell with them. Their hope is that as the years pass and new generations rediscover this most unusual occurrence, maybe a few of the scores of compelling questions might finally be answered once and for all. Time is the enemy of those who believe that Roswell was indeed covered up. With witnesses aging and memories growing fainter by the day, researchers can only hope that they'll turn up something new very soon.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that what crashed outside of Roswell was an extraterrestrial craft. That opinion is going to remain firm through the 50th anniversary and far beyond that.
4 major conclusions after 36 years of study and investigation. 1, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. 2nd, the subject of flying saucers represents a kind of cosmic Watergate. That means some few people within the governments, the United States, Canada, Britain, Russia, etc., have known since July 1947, when 2 crashed flying saucers and several alien bodies were recovered here in New Mexico. 3rd, none of the arguments made by a very small group of debunkers, noisy negativists as I call them, stand up under careful scrutiny. And finally, 4, we're dealing with the most important story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft, successful cover-up. That's a major story.
With all that has been said by the government, the believers, and the skeptics, could there possibly be more to the Roswell story? Well, after much criticism of their 1994 report, the Air Force has recently revisited the topic by issuing what they call their final word on the Roswell incident. In the report, the Air Force attempts to explain eyewitness accounts of alien bodies at the crash site as mixed memories from tests in the area years later. The report's conclusion is that dummies used in impact testing from high-altitude balloons were misidentified by observers as extraterrestrials. So, is this truly the final word on Roswell? Maybe for some. But just before the release of the latest Air Force report, the skies over the Southwest lit up once again with mysterious aerial phenomena. On March 13th, 1997, strange objects were observed by multiple witnesses in the night skies over Phoenix, Arizona.
I believe it a serious offense for anyone, human, space alien, or otherwise, to engage in mysterious activity in our nighttime skies.
Responding to public concerns, the governor of Arizona addressed the issue and, with tongue planted firmly in cheek, announced the arrest of the supposed alien perpetrator. The objects defied conventional identification, and the Air Force has declined to make any official statement on their origin. I hope we've been able to shed some light on the enduring mystery of Roswell. One has to wonder, will we ever know the full truth about this case? Or do we already have the answers in front of us? What do you think?
Get personal with 3 of England's top footballers.
In the paper, everyone just gets sucked in by what certain people say.
All new 3 Lions is next on Sky One. While over on Sky One Mix, was it murder?
Her remains have been found, along with the remains of Gerard Gary.
The truth will be unearthed in Cold Case.